Welcome to the Slim Nation 101's podcast.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Slim Nation's One-on-Ones podcast. I'm Slim Overton, of course, and thank you for joining us tonight. And before we get started, I want to ask you to like, if you're watching on Facebook, like, and if you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, comments. We're looking for your comments. If you have anything going on that's similar to what we're going to talk about tonight, please comment so the two ladies here might be able to address it. But and share this with your friends and foes. But anyway, we have some special guests here tonight, and you'll be familiar with both of them. They've been on the show before. We have my home girl, Shona Swinson. Hello, how are you?
Hi, James. How are you today?
Yes, yeah. And we have who I'm claiming as my cousin, Kaleema Overton Ameen. And thank you both for showing up tonight for this very important conversation.
Thank
And
you.
I want to start, and of course, I like to mention that Kaleema is the author of Hidden in Plain Sight, a book how long has the book been out now, Kaleema?
2 years now. Yeah.
2 years now, and she's still, I think her purpose is more driven. Of course, she wants to sell the books, but I think her purpose is more driven towards giving out information because she is on TikTok every Sunday. Is it Sunday evening at 8 o'clock?
From 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. And I watched one of them too. And at first I was thinking, I said, what could she say every Sunday night? But there's still plenty. And see, somebody has your book, and of course, I have it. And what could she say every Sunday night? And it's always something to talk about concerning this subject. And you do an outstanding job of reaching the people that watch and bringing out. Some people hold these things inside, and some of these things that you go through, you have to talk about it. And even if you're talking about it through comments on this medium, just getting it out of your system is probably the best way. So make sure you get her book and tell how you can get your book.
My book is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, and also on Kindle. And it is the hard copy is $29.99, the paperback is $19.99, and then the electronic version is $9.99.
Everywhere you can get it. So it's no excuse if you don't have that book.
You
might want to get it before it goes on the bestseller list, because then you won't be able to find it. So make sure you get that book. And Shona is holding it up, and Shona's going to have a book coming. I'm just making a prediction. But anyway, let's get started with it.
You're putting that out there, huh? Okay.
Yeah. But let us, because everybody's story is similar in some ways, but different in many ways as well. So we need to hear all the stories of the people of this subject. So, Shona, let me begin with you. You were on this podcast a few weeks ago, and you sort of let it all out. You told your story from your hometown to where you're living now. And how did that feel? You told me in the beginning you were a little nervous about coming on. And, I know you probably had these conversations in private with people before, but now you're coming out and showing your face and talking publicly about it. How did it feel to be able to talk about it? Because I know during the conversation, it was hard sometimes. You had to sort of stop and regroup. But what was the feeling, finally being able to just talk about it?
Yeah, I must admit it is liberating. I mean, how many people in their lifetime get to legitimately show their behind? for a good reason.
For a good reason. A lot of
Yep.
people do that, but
So
not
I'm
necessarily for a
showing
good
mother
reason.
out because I want to get the attention of anyone who has had anything similar or anything that would cause similar feelings, um, to be able to know that they can survive it.
Mhm.
It is possible. There are times when you really don't feel like you're going to survive it.
Mhm.
There was a point at which, it's just for me, it was just like what you see on the movies or television when when you actually feel like there was one incident that I spoke on the last time where I actually felt like I would never see my children again.
Mm.
It was when he beat me up in the dark, and I really thought that I was going to die. And at that moment that I got that feeling, I literally saw the faces of all of the people that I love just flashing before me in the darkness. All of my children, one by one. That that was it. I just knew that was the last time I would see them.
Well, and and we talked during that first time, we talked about how long we've known each other. We graduated high school together, even though I might look like your daddy because you look so young. But anyway, we graduated high school
Oh,
together.
that's
The only
sweet.
difference might be 1 year, you came out a year earlier. That's how you caught up with us. But we talked, but even after high school, we knew each other. We lived close, pretty close neighborhoods. I was friends with your brother, played basketball with him, you know, uh, in the communities. And it was hard to me hearing the stories because I never would have imagined
Hmm.
you going through that. And I guess that's similar with a lot of people. We just don't know, and we don't always see that. And a lot of times, it's spelled out and hidden in plain sight how well these guys can groom not only the person they're dealing with, but the people around them. They might be able to groom me as the classmate that just sees you and thinks everything is all right and think that guy's a pretty cool guy. But in reality, he has created a pure hell for you and
Yes,
your family.
yes, yes. Um, I did want to cite two incidences tonight. I didn't want to leave them out because I need you to feel the intensity of what was going on for really almost a decade. I can't even believe that. I never even really thought about that aspect until recently. How long
How
I went
long it
through it.
was.
Yeah, I really didn't think about that. But like I said,
But
my son was born in '79, and I left Portsmouth in, I want to say, February of '88.
Wow.
That's a long time.
Mm.
That's a very long time for
um,
all of us, because it wasn't just me. I can cite an incident where my son, his son, who was just at the time, I think maybe 5 or 6, or no, maybe 6 or 7. Um, so I was living in an apartment, and it was a part of an apartment building. So there was a hallway. So my son was told not to bounce his basketball, out in the hallway before. So this particular day, as kids will do, he was in the hall bouncing his basketball. So his father beat him for that, and he beat him so intensely with his belt that as I was tending to the wounds in his back from the leather cutting his skin, through his tears, he said to me, and I know he was hurting, he was in pain. He said, I just don't want him to hurt you, Mama. And at that moment, I felt like what he was saying to me is that he was doing things to to avert his attention from me, because when he was, you know, yelling at him or just showing him any kind of attention, that was time that he wasn't hurting his mother.
Mm.
That's what I got from that. I don't know if he remembers that, but that's what I got from that moment.
And before I let Kaleema chime in, and because you mentioned your son, I think one of the things you mentioned last time, as your daughter was grown and you didn't realize you were having a conversation. It was about the Diddy thing. You watching the girl
Yes,
being dragged
this
down the hall by
this was
him, and it brought up some past memories. And then your daughter said she remembered that, and you didn't even realize that she
that was just two
carried
weeks ago
that with
we
her
talked
all
about
those
that.
years.
My daughter is now over 50, and she
Wow.
said, "Mama, I remember that."
So
She said,
I brought that point up to show how it affects the whole family. And
"Yes,
Kalima, you know, since you've written your book and you experienced it, and you talked to other ladies, how similar does, you've heard a little bit, you haven't seen the full video yet, but how similar does Shona's story sound to some of the other ladies, or even to your situation?
Well, in my book, I don't cover physical abuse, and none of the ladies in my book experienced physical abuse. My book really is kind of like the precursor to that. All of the grooming, mental, physical, mental, spiritual, financial, psychological grooming and abuse, that kind of is the gateway to that type of physical abuse. And I didn't cover that because I felt like physical abuse needed a book on its own. It's something that's going to, I can't do in like chapters, right? It was something I would need to do separately. And but the similarities, I think Shona will probably agree to that, the grooming process in the beginning, because of course, you don't get into a relationship and day one they're abusing you and you stay. There's a grooming process before you get to that, or there's some type of isolation process, isolating you from your family, your friends, your religious community, or isolating you financially to be able to gain control to get to the point of being able to go to the physical abuse. And that grooming stage, it could be a brief period depending upon, because these people are very, I just always say, when the devil is busy, he sends the narc. And the one who has is inflicting physical abuse is also has those narcissistic, behaviors. And so it just depends. They're very cunning, so they know how long they need to groom. The grooming process could be short or long, depending upon the individual they're, targeting at the time. So it won't be the same. It'll be the same process, but not the same length of time with the grooming. And then what I in my book I describe as the love bombing, where everything is perfect and they're going to create this perfect utopia situation, and then the demeaning and spirit breaking, when things just kind of start trickling with the verbal maybe insults, or making you doubt yourself, your family, your friends, doubt your choices, and just constantly be demeaning and berating and belittling. And then the abuse, and then and sometimes the abandonment. So I talk about in the book how the process, you have to recognize the stages of the process, because it may be different lengths of time. For the women in my book, it was like that. Some of them had long periods, where one lady, her husband actually, in the end, he was actually sexually exploiting her. And it's not like he was a random person on the street, he was her husband, but it was a 9-year process before they got to that point. 9 years of all other types of things happening, with the love bombing, then the psychological abuse, or doing things like driving down a dark road full speed and turning the headlights out until she agrees to whatever it is he wants her to agree to this time, and so she had probably the most the most abusive story, I would say, because he started exploiting her and bringing people home to create what he wanted to have, like this swinging lifestyle that was not something that she wanted. It was forced upon her. And so but all the ladies, including myself, went through the same process, the love bombing, demeaning, spirit breaking. And people will say, oh, why did you stay? Or how did you not see it? But it's not like, and I wonder if you will agree, it's not like someone throwing a big boulder through your window while you're driving down the interstate. You would recognize that and you would see that. It's more like little rocks and pebbles. And you're like, wow, that was weird. That was some weird behavior, or that was a weird comment, or, why are they doing something that seems out of the ordinary? Someone who says they doesn't drink, and now you see them drinking, or they're using different substances, or something out of the ordinary, and you kind of dismiss it because they go right back to being nice again. You think, oh, they're having a bad day. But it's you're seeing behind the mask, and you don't know that you're seeing behind the mask, and that I experienced that. But that was my discard process was only about 2 months, and it wasn't 2 straight months. It was really kind of condensed to 2 weeks because of the unique situation. He had to kind of condense that part because he realized he wasn't going to get away with that part. So that had to be quick. But in some cases they expand that abusive part because they get the best of both worlds with the psychological abuse, having you on hand and being able to abuse you, and you not realize it because you're dismissing it. And we always make excuses, for the narc. And I didn't really intend to write about narcissism, but the research led to narcissism. And so that all of these types are narcissistic at their core.
And I can say, when Shona went through it back in, I remember asking you, Shona, when you were on our last broadcast about getting help or seeing someone, and you said in 1970 something, it wasn't it was more of a stigma, especially in the African American community. If you saw a shrink or you saw somebody, that wasn't cool, and it was just the time that you were back there. It wasn't that kind of help. I'm not saying that help wasn't there, but for the ordinary African American or Black person, that wasn't available. It wasn't a part of your insurance if you had it. So, and I wanted to say too, for the people that think, okay, psychological and physical abuse, one is worse than the other. I would say that they will be equal, because you could have permanent damage from psychological abuse and permanent damage from physical abuse. So, and actually, sometimes people that are psychologically abused might tend to stay longer. And like you said, Kaleema, that's a precursor for turning into physical abuse, because they stay longer because it's just psychological and they just try to deal with it, but the physical abuse is something. And then on that, Sonia, you said you were physically abused, but you were there almost 10 years. So is it a difference? My point is it a difference in the time that you were going through that, and maybe now, Kaleema, you think it's more help? I mean, it's like books that people like you that are writing books and getting the word out, where people will see those signs.
I just kind of want to add in there, and is that the violence against women did not become against the law until the Clinton administration. And people think, it was something that was always there. The Clinton administration was very recent, in the grand scheme of things, right? And so there was no federal law against abusing your wife until the Clinton administration. That's just a couple of, that's like yesterday.
Yeah. Because it was normal for a guy to say, it was normal for a guy to tell another guy, man, you better handle your woman. If she came out of pocket and the other guys were around, say, look, you better handle your woman. And usually that meant to physically, take her, shut her up.
Yeah.
And even when it became against the law during the Clinton administration, it still was another, 20 years before it was actively being, used in the police community, So that was another issue. And I wanted to quickly touch base about the long-term damage. When I was doing my research for my book, I read about the damage to the frontal lobe of the brain when you experience long-term psychological spiritual or, physical abuse, it actually causes the frontal cortex of the brain to go into atrophy from long-term, even psychological abuse. So when people say just get over it, even if you haven't had physical abuse to the body, the function of the brain actually changes even from long-term psychological abuse. So you can't just get over it. It's something that has to be really undone. It has to be, dismantled in the brain. And this may lead to why, oftentimes, like, especially in Shona's case, like if you're in this 10-year situation, it's changing the makeup and the decisions that you're making from the long-term abuse. And so it's kind of creating that setting, right, for the setting, to be in there long-term.
Wow. And and then you get that from family members that might be telling you, hey, you better hang in there, especially if you
Oh,
with a
yeah.
man that's doing everything, taking care of everything financially, and doing everything from what people on the outside can see. They say, hey, you can take a few of those psychological abuses or physical abuses. Look the way you're living. Look what you had. So I guess that's a part of it too. But you still need to pay attention to those signs, right?
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to.
I said she's so cute.
Oh. Yes, I just wanted to, when you were talking about when people say, look at how you're living, and then it's also, if the person, it depends on the type of narcissist. There's multiple types of narcissists. There's three main ones. The epitome of narcissism is a serial killer. And so when you think about the serial killer, the narcissist, and then the malignant narcissist and the covert, the one who looks good and they walk the walk and talk the talk, of a safe person. These are people you find in the pulpit, in the minbar, in the Muslim community, the people you find in the schools and the churches and, in the corporations, and they can look like this, right? I kept this coming backwards. They can look like that. And so, but the serial killer at their core is a narcissist as well. And so this is how they're able to inflict this type of injury and pain on people, and they don't care because their frontal lobe is also not firing on all pistons, right? And so the neurologist that I was reading about doing my research, he was explaining how, even those who are inflicting the damage and those who are the recipients of the damage, it, decreases the function of the frontal lobe. And this is the executive function of the brain. And it actually helps you make decisions about your safety, about taking risk, about empathy, about critical thinking. So just think of all of those things are being impacted by the psychological or spiritual or physical abuse. Then of course, the person can't make those critical thinking, can't access that critical thinking part of the brain, or they can't access the empathetic part if they're the abuser, or they can't access the part of the brain that detects danger and alerts you to risky decisions. So this is how this whole thing kind of comes together, in a perfect storm on both sides, for the person to keep inflicting the abuse and for the person to not be able to navigate their way out of it. It's like a perfect storm.
Really, I think when you're in that mode, or at least for me, it's like your adrenaline is on 192%.
Mm-hmm.
And having said that, the analogy I would use is like, have you ever seen the movie Carrie?
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
the scary movie, when she's, when they have really ticked her off and now she is going full force, just floating through the air. All you can see is tunnel vision. You just are determined to keep it moving in that direction. It doesn't matter what's on the left or what's on the right. You're living, you're in survival mode at that point.
Yes, absolutely. I think that from the ladies I interviewed for my book, and they were from different backgrounds, Muslim, Christian, Catholic, African American, South American, and Caucasian, they all experienced the same grooming process and the same psychological and spiritual and emotional abusive, the process is always the same. And so that's what I was hoping, excuse me, to do with my book, is to expose the process so people are able to protect themselves and able to remove themselves early on before they get entangled, in the in the relationship. And so when people think about you hear people talking about trauma bonding, and they make the assumption that the trauma bond happened at the end of the relationship, or when when they left, or when the person left, and now they're having trouble dealing with the person being gone. But the trauma bonding actually begins in the love bombing stage, when everything is perfect. And this is when they're kind of just roping you in, and whatever you say you want and need and hope for yourself, for your family, for your religious community, they're going to just say me too. They're going to agree to everything. They're going to groom you, your family, your friends, your coworkers, the neighbors, the dog, the cat, the fish. Everybody's going to get a taste of the grooming, because they want to compromise your safe spaces. And so when you go and report the abuse, they're going to say, what are you talking about? He cut my grass when my leg was broken. He helped my mom when her car broke down. He did, this, that, and the third, because they're grooming everyone around you. So when you run for help, they're hoping you won't find any. And so once they get that done, that's where the trauma bonding is actually setting in, when everything is great, because they get you on the hook, and then they start to demean you verbally, and demean your choices, or make you feel self-conscious. And now they,
Isolate you.
you call them on it and isolate you. And then when you call them on, they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And they're going to do better. And then they're going to do it again. Love bombing, demeaning, spirit breaking, love bombing, demeaning, spirit breaking. I'm going to do better. And after another abusive situation, I'm going to do better. And so now you're hooked, really not on when people think about trauma bonding, they think hooked on the trauma. You're hooked on the hope of change. They're getting you hooked on the hope that they're going to be back to that person that you first met. And you're going to keep going back in for more. Right. Yeah. And that's what the trauma bonding, it starts in the love bombing stage, and people zoom right past it. It's a red light, and they're because everything is great. And they're not. We got to slow down and stop and think and ask questions, and not give out too much information. We women, we give out too much information in hopes that we're building some kind of bond, but we need to keep all that information to ourselves, because they're taking all the information to use against us.
I agree.
Until you're in a safe space. I'm not saying treat everyone like that, but
right.
Giving information to the narc, that's going to be to your own detriment. You have to figure out who you're dealing with first.
That is so true. Wow.
Shona,
yes.
Tell a little bit more about your situation, especially right before you moved to another state.
Yes.
To what point had you gotten?
Well, I had gotten to the point where, after we went into the shelter for battered women, like I said, this man had been stalking me for years. He knew everywhere I went. He knew everybody that I knew, because it's a small city. Everybody grew up together there, So he would always find me. And this last time when we went into the shelter, he had just shown up everywhere. At any time of the day or night, he showed up everywhere. At this point in time, he was working for the city of Portsmouth, and they drove those big white trucks. So we're in the shelter. It was wintertime. We happened upon a really nice day. We had been stuck in the shelter for, by this time, probably close to a couple of months. So it was a nice day. We decided we would go out for a walk, myself and my children and two other ladies and their children. So we're walking down the sidewalk, and lo and behold, this white truck shows up. This man jumps out of the truck, and he came for me. And I remember so clearly, by this time, I had been through just everything. I was really broken down, I guess. By this time, when he jumped out of that truck, I just sort of cowered. Like, Jesus, this is it, So my middle daughter, she had to be maybe 11 11, maybe 12. But she just stepped out in front of the crowd, which I was in the middle of. And she put her little arms out like, no, no, you are not going to touch her.
Wow.
You are not going to touch her. That was so brave of her, you know? And he ended up getting back in the truck and going on about his business. But I would have thought that being in the shelter, now I feel safe. You know, the first feel of this feeling I've had in so long, so many years. And then the one day I decide, you know, it's safe. You know, I've relaxed and we can actually go outside and go for a walk down the sidewalk. And he showed up there. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But that's how bad it had gotten. At that moment, I was just whatever. That's how
And
bad.
then, yeah, you knew you had to get out of our small town. If even in the shelter, you had that kind of,
In the shelter.
yes.
I'm sure my kids remember that. They're probably on. But yeah, that was wild.
Yeah,
But
Kaleema, you know, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but God is good.
God is
Yes,
good.
yes, it is.
I've always
But
believed as
Kaleema,
long as you take one step forward, he will lead you. He will lead you. He will keep you moving. Just one foot. And he gonna help you with the left foot if you start on the right. So
Yeah.
I don't care what direction. Try something. Try something. You just can't do nothing. You gotta try something. Even if you
yeah,
fail at it, if it doesn't suit your purpose, just go in another direction, but keep it moving.
yeah, you have to trust. And Kaleema, I was going to ask you with the ladies you talked to because her and her talk about her daughter, stepping in between, and that was the only thing. In some situations, that's not enough, but that was the only thing that stopped him from doing any harm. I think. With the ladies
Yeah.
you talked to, was it situations where the children were involved and were were they all? I know they weren't all single ladies, but how with you talking to them, how was the children? How did
Well,
that fit
one
in with what they were going through?
the most pervasive, I think, was, and of course, we're talking about psychological, and emotional abuse primarily. The One of the women talked about how even once because she had a daughter, and the daughter was also, being groomed, in the process, and so she talked about even when I spoke to her for the interview, she had been divorced 8 years. And as soon as the Zoom we were on, because I interviewed them, they had to answer a list of questions, and then we interviewed over the phone, and then we interviewed on Zoom. And I, compiled these things in the book. But as soon as the camera opened up, I could see that she was still traumatized. And this is 8 years after, the divorce. And then she was telling me about when it comes to the daughter, how even after so long of being away from him, the daughter still was having a hard time, both of them, even just making decisions, even just answering a question like, what do you want to eat? Because they were accustomed to, when someone says, what do you want to eat for dinner? They were accustomed to trying to figure out what he wanted to eat and to say that. And so even though they were away from him, they couldn't make basic decisions. And that kind of goes back to what I was explaining about the frontal lobe. They had to really kind of reconnect all of those I would say those nerves to get everything working again, to say, hey, I'm not in this situation. I can have my own thoughts. I can have my own opinions. I can select what I want to eat for dinner, what I want to wear, because he had restricted even, what she could wear. He had restricted, her diet, the color of her hair, her makeup, her food. And he was just kind of, completely dominating her and just putting her in a place where she had to second guess every choice that she made. And so she was saying that even to that day, here it is 8 years after the divorce, that if someone says, what do you want to eat? They had a hard time even just making what seemed to be a small decision like that. And that's how, pervasive the psychological abuse was for her and the daughter.
Well, you talk about in your books, it's the difference between some narcissists and just people that have bad behaviors. Listening to Shona, what do you think
All of the
her
above.
partners there? All of the okay.
Yes, but yeah, the bad behavior, the difference is like with the narcissists and the people who are emotionally and psychologically and physically abusive, they're never going to want to go to therapy, right? And so they're going to groom everyone around them. And if they can't groom them with the love bombing, they will groom them by intimidation, which is the malignant narcissist. But a person with bad behavior, it can come from immaturity, right? It could come from just lack of home training. It could come from
Insanity.
fear. Vanity. You said vanity.
Insanity.
Well, that's the narc. And then the person with the bad behavior, people get them kind of they mislabel people with bad behavior and call them a narcissist. But the narc is very only about 17% of the population are going to be true narcissists, right? The person with the bad behavior can change. They want to change. They can lean into change, right? The person with the bad behavior is just it's a habit of this type of behavior that comes, like I said, from maybe immaturity or just cultural norms within their family, and they can learn how to do something different, right? But the narcissist, this is something that's a part of the makeup of the brain, and they're not going to lean into that. They'll try to groom the therapist, and if they can't groom the therapist, they're going to try to convince you that the therapist is incompetent. If they can't convince you of that, they're going to say, you're a fool for going to therapy. If they can't convince you of that, they're going to say, you know what? You don't need to go to therapy. I can fix what's wrong with you, right? Because with them, everything's wrong with you and nothing is wrong with them. And these are one of the signs that you know what type personality type you're dealing with. The person with bad behavior, they may say, oh, my parents didn't teach us to do this growing up. And they can
Like we
see,
used to say, no home training.
right, no home training, right? Or maybe they're just immature, because remember that frontal lobe doesn't fully develop until you're 25 years old. So between 25 and 30, people are still making immature decisions. They're still, they can't really judge unsafe behaviors, unsafe practices. They don't have the full ability to have critical thinking. So you'll see some of those things. But when you're looking at people who are 30, 35, and 40, and 45, and 50, and they're still having this abusive, selfish type behavior that's pervasive everywhere they go, and they have no insight to what they're doing. And not only do they not have insight, they don't care. It's just like the serial killer. They're going to groom the person.
Bingo.
Right. The serial killer grooms the serial killer always shows up as a nice guy. When they're chasing the serial killer around the city and they talk to the neighbors after they'll say, oh my goodness, I never thought he would do something like that. He was so nice. And that's how they groom people into cars or get into their homes. This is a different person than the person with bad behavior. The person, the narcissist, intends to groom you. They intend to abuse you. They intend to harm you. They intend to unalive you if they get a chance. The narc will unalive you too. They will unalive you too, because a malignant narc is it's dangerous. Like, it sounds like her husband was a malignant narc, and he's just a step below the serial killer. The malignant narc, may only unalive one person. It's not much difference between them and the serial K, who will unalive multiple people.
Okay, one at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the person with bad behavior, it doesn't do that. And so that's how we want to make sure we understand who we're dealing with. And it doesn't mean we need to deal with people with bad behavior. We don't need to fool with that either. But if they're willing to change and they lean into therapy, they can be productive in a family, in a relationship, in a community. But the narc will never do that. They will never be able to do that because they don't have the capacity for that. They lack empathy. And you have to have empathy to be able to do that.
So can you be both?
Both, you mean bad behavior and a narc?
Yeah.
Well, it's really kind of like a progression, because the narcissism,
okay, I got you.
narcissism is a personality disorder. Having bad behavior is a defect of upbringing, of cultural norms. Because think about it, for us, we consider some things bad behavior, like eating with your hands, for example. But this is something that's normal behavior in other cultures, right? But if we go someplace and we're in the restaurant and people just eating with their hands, that's not finger food. We consider this outside of the cultural norms. That's what bad behavior is. They're doing things that, are are from, like I said, from insecurity, from lack of maturity, from cultural things, norms they picked up at home, and things like that can change. Right. But the narc,
if they choose to. Yeah.
If they choose to, right.
Yeah.
If they choose to.
But the bad behavior guys, they can be abusive as well. But what you're saying, they have the ability to probably transition into something else, into something better, as opposed to a narc needs special help.
That the abusive person is a person with bad behavior, and the abusive person goes on the other side. We're going to put them on the side when they go to physical abuse, psychological abuse, emotional, spiritual abuse, financial abuse. This is narcissistic behavior.
There's something wrong up here. Yeah.
Right. The person with bad behavior is just not honoring cultural norms. It's not honoring people's space. Not, but they can learn to do that because they just don't know any better. And they're not intending. And it's not their intent. Because when you think about a person with bad behavior, let's say, and I'm going to try to make this quick, but an example I like to use is that, let's say you're having your retirement party and you had a disagreement with your spouse, and they show up at your retirement party and at your job, and they come there and they still want to continue the argument. This is just bad behavior, right? It's poor home training. It's shenanigans and tomfoolery for everyone to see. The narc is not going to do that. You could have the biggest fight you want to have with the narc. They'll show up at your retirement party. They'll be all smiles, hugs, kisses. They will sing your accolades. They will tell everyone how wonderful you are, how beautiful you are, how smart you are. And on the way home in the car, who do you think you are? Why are you always trying to get attention? Why, this, that, and the third? And now they want to fight and do things out of the eyesight of others, because that's their intent, to groom others and to abuse you. The person with bad behavior, because they don't have the intent, they will act a fool for everybody to see. They don't care because they don't understand. It's just immature behavior. You see what I'm saying? But the narc place their behavior out of eyesight of everyone else, and they're going to abuse you while no one is looking, or while they have you away from the people, or if it's at your house, as soon as the guests leave, they're going to start in on you.
Yes.
Why do you always have to have your family? Why do you have those friends? Yeah,
I wanted you to explain that, because I didn't want people to try to give an excuse for someone having bad behavior, and they really are.
We don't need any of it, really. I'm just explaining.
None of them get a pass. None of them.
Nobody gets a pass. I'm just saying that some people, and you have to look at their age,
That
have to
too.
look at their age. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about the court system. You think the court system has gotten better? You mentioned that it wasn't even illegal to abuse women until later on. You think the court system has gotten better? Because, Shona, you can talk about it. You had an experience in the court system. This was back in the 80s, I think. And, tell a little bit about that so we can move forward and see how the court system is protecting our women.
Well, this would have been late 79 into 80s, early 80s. We went to court, Kaleema, right around 9 or 10 times. I actually lost count. He would, as soon as somebody would bail him out of jail, he would be right back at my door. And oftentimes he would be gone by the time the police get to my house. So there were countless numbers of undocumented times, that there were incidences. He would call my phone in the middle of the night, like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, just to see if I had somebody in my house. And if I didn't appease him by answering his questions or whatever, he would be at my door within 30 minutes. So there were a few times that I just got my babies up late at night, and we went to a motel and stayed just so we could get a good night's sleep. So when I tell you this man was relentless, I still to this day, and it's not, I've heard that he has abused women since me. Um, and he was just honoring mean that he hit his own daughter with a sawed-off shotgun. She was 13 years old. That's my son's half sister. She was 13. I'll never forget that. She was 13 years old, and he hit her with a sawed-off shotgun. The woman that he subsequently married was about the age of my daughters, which meant that she wouldn't have been in a circle that would even know him because he was so much older than her. You see what I'm saying? Growing up, so she didn't know anything about any of his previous behavior with me because people, in her circle wouldn't have talked about anything like that because it happened so long ago.
Right.
Because she's like a generation younger. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that's who he ended up marrying. And they're, of course, not together today. But my son actually told his wife, he gonna do you just like he did my mama.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly what happened.
And there is no change. They do the same thing over and over again. They're constantly reinventing themselves. They hop from church to church, from mosque to mosque, from family to family, just, leaving a trail of destruction. And there's never any need or a want to change because, like I said, they don't care. They have no empathy. They can't put themselves in someone else's situation. And so all they do is reinvent themselves. If they happen to abandon the marriage or the family, or if the abused people, the abused family members get away from them, they just reinvent themselves into something else. I saw someone even go from being a Muslim to a Christian in a pulpit right here locally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, this person, they're in a pulpit now. And so they just reinvent themselves for people like you're saying, like she didn't know who he was because he
Exactly.
inserted himself into a different subset of the community so he can start his abuse all over again.
My son says he surely did tell her that. He said, yeah, he remembered the basketball incident too. He's on. But back to the court thing. I was telling them last time, Kaleema, that there was this one time that we went before the judge and, James and I discussed it, off to the side, who that actual judge is because he remembers him. I don't know if he had a reputation for it or what. What say you, James? You've heard of him having some dealings like that before?
Not necessarily that, but I knew he was, let me put it this way, he wasn't the best judge.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
and my father knew because he was an attorney, so he.
Oh, wow. So to finish my story, Kaleema, when I was standing before him because there had been this incident where I had decided that I would start dating someone, and I did. So I had my friend over to my apartment. It was like a townhouse, and we were watching TV. So here comes my ex knocking at the door, and when I opened it, he pushed his way in, and he went straight to the TV and unplugged it and said, I paid for this TV. Y'all can't watch this. And he didn't pay for it. Okay. But that's a whole other story. But yeah, so him and he and my company got into a fight. I got into the fight with him because I jumped on his back. So we're both fighting him, tearing up my living room. Okay. Yeah. So this is the incident that we're before this judge for now, right? So I'm standing there after my friend testified. I'm standing there before him and I'm speaking, pleading my side of the case. And this judge in Portsmouth, Virginia, was sitting there like this with his eyes rolling around in his head, falling asleep as I stood before him pleading my case. So, like James said the last time, that didn't end well for me because he went home and to harass me some more.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
that was the legal system back then. And you know what's so really, really ironic is that, well, first of all, I'm going to tell you with the court system, the policeman. I was telling James that there was this club there in Portsmouth called the Godfather's Den. And it was one of the only little spots in town, where we went because there just weren't that many places to choose from. But anywho, that was the and somebody said something to me about my anywho. So anyway,
I say anywho too. Go ahead.
you do? Oh wow! So I'm out of this nice spot. So I'm going to have a drink or just socialize anyway. So I saw one of the police officers that had taken him away from my house in handcuffs during one of the incidences, the many incidences that they were called for. And he recognized me. This policeman walked up to me and he leaned forward and he said, you shouldn't play with a man's feelings.
From one knock to another, probably.
So I don't know what what dialogue he had with that police officer as he was handcuffed in the back of his car. I'm sure he told him whatever lies that could flow out of his mouth. Exactly. And this man had the nerve to say that to me. So
was another grooming incident, Kaleema? Grooming the policeman?
Yes, or the policeman was also, an abusive as well. Yeah, I did have a much better, but I know you're saying this was in the 80s, right? I did have a much better experience with the legal system, and I actually was able to things occurred that wouldn't normally occur, but in my favor, right? And because I had an attorney and a judge who knew about narcissism, and they could see the whole thing, and they could see what was happening. And so all the little tricks and stuff that they, tried in court didn't work. And so, but now we're talking about, 2023, not, 1980.
Right.
Huge cry between, so like I said, even though abusing your wife, sexually assaulting your wife did not become illegal, like I said, into the Clinton administration, it was still many years before it was really enacted upon. And now even still, they lack training. They lack training to deal with that. And so it's still people are still falling through the cracks. And that's even in my book, I wanted to find out. I was curious because I'm a federal policy analyst by day and an author by night. So I'm constantly researching and reading and analyzing things. And I wanted to analyze the policy and the procedure of NARC, like what makes them tick and what makes us a target. And sometimes you hear people say, you're attracting what you are. And that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because you're not attracting what you are. We're not attracting what you are, because you wouldn't attract someone to you also to abuse you. But what's happening is if we haven't completely healed, or we're predispositioned for certain types of behaviors that we've seen in the home, in the neighborhood, or we haven't healed from a previous abusive situation, then this is why we keep falling into the same pothole every time we come to it. And we're up in the pothole up to our neck, and we don't recognize it, because if, let's say, for instance, we got hit by a car and broke our leg and the first responders come, they try to assess you to see what's the biggest, most egregious injury, and they deal with that first. But they still have to take you to the hospital to get the cast, to get the crutch, to put you on the street. Well, all they did was fix your broken leg. They haven't addressed your psychological injury, your emotional injury, your financial injury. They haven't addressed your spiritual injury. And so now you're really kind of out there with a crutch and a limp, a psychological limp, a spiritual limp, a financial limp, and you still can't really run. You're still limping through life. And here comes the narc. Here comes another grooming, the same narc, like you experienced, the same one coming back, or a brand new one, right? Here they come because they see that you still have this limp. It's not that you're attracting who you are. If we're fully healed, we have knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. We have knowledge and understanding about what happened, and then we have the wisdom to apply it to our life to avoid those things. But until we get fully healed mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, and legally made whole, all of these things kind of have to holistically come together, so we can repair our frontal lobe, repair all these aspects, do triage, mental, physical, spiritual, and financial, and understand, and then we can protect ourselves. But so often we don't even know how to protect ourselves because we don't even know that we're going through the red light. We're running through red lights, all the red signs are there, the red flags are there, but we don't recognize them. And that's what happened with myself, all the ladies in my book. We had all the red flags that were there. The narcs display all the same red flags, but if we don't recognize them, we just keep driving through the red light, and we don't understand what's happening.
Yeah, and it's so important that you mentioned that someone with that type of behavior moves from one woman to the next and does the same thing to each woman, because a lot of the women they abuse feel like it's something that they did. It's something, it must have been something, it must have been my actions or something I did, or they make them feel that way. So, but this person is just going to be that way with anybody that they have a relationship with.
Oh, absolutely. And that was the most freeing thing for me, because I had an opportunity to talk to the previous victim of the narc. And had I not had that opportunity, I would probably not have been able to catapult through my healing process, because they want you to feel ashamed. They want to make it your fault. And the people they've groomed will make it your fault. And their family, they know they created a narc, but they'll make it your fault. And so you will shoulder all of that blame. But when she explained to me, oh no, he did this to me too. This is just what he does. He does it everywhere he goes. But the person that's abusive like that, and you think it's only at home or in the romantic relationship, they're this way at home, at school, at church, in the community, at work. They're doing the same thing everywhere they go. This is just a part of the core of who they are. So if we understand that, then we know, oh, it's not me, it's them. Because no matter who they come across, no matter how amenable that person is, no matter how much that person caters to their wants and needs, at some point they're going to become that same person when they get to that demeaning and spirit breaking. And this also means they have a new target. It doesn't mean they're going to leave you as a target. It means they have another target. And so now they have to dismantle you. So they dismantle you and put all these flaws in you and make the whole thing your fault, and dismantle you before they get to the abuse or the abandonment.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And excuse me, as we wind down, I want to ask Shona, I know talking about this brought up some very horrific memories and things like that now, but really, how are you doing now? How are things going for you now?
Unfortunately, at my age, at my young, tender age, I still have to work right now. I came out of retirement to make life better for me, just because God blessed me with an opportunity to be able to do it, So I'm just still on my feet. I'm good. As long as there's movement, in a positive direction, I'm good. So I just get up every day.
And looking at the numbers from your last show, you are reaching people, you are connecting, and a lot of people are doing it. So, and that was the main purpose of you coming out and just telling your story, which is very important. And I appreciate you doing it. And I want to say to the people about the Hidden in Plain Sight. It's not just for women. This is for men and your family and everything, because a lot of people need to be able to recognize those signs as well, because sometimes it's hard for that person that's in that situation to really come out of it, especially when that person has groomed everybody around them. So you need to be able to read this book, and you can tell the research that Kaleema has put into it. I mean, talking about the frontal lobes, and I mean, I I might have to go look
You're
up some
so
of those
smart.
things
I love
too.
you.
You might have to put doctor on the front of your name.
Okay.
Anyway,
I love her.
but you can tell the book is well researched, and Kaleema, your first test audience were men, all men.
Oh, yes. I wanted, because when I was while I was writing the book in real time while I was going through the trauma. And so
Wow,
when I
and that's
got
amazing in itself.
I don't, I honestly don't even know how I did it. It's almost like a blur. Because someone had asked me, I said, I have no idea. I don't even know who was, maybe God was writing for me, because I don't know how I did that. Because not only was I writing in the middle of the trauma, I was caring for my father. He was terminally ill, and I was caring for him in my home. And then we went on this family vacation that was actually our wedding anniversary, and he abandoned us there. So all of this stuff is going on, and I start writing. I didn't intend to write a book. I was just researching, because I like to research stuff to figure out how do these things happen. But
that's your profession. Yeah.
Yes, the nature of your job, right?
Kind of like second nature. And and so I think that for me, with when you were talking about it before, I was in that place where for the first year when the book came out, I would talk about it in the third person. And then one time I was in an interview, and my therapist was watching the interview. He said, "You finally started talking about it in the first person."
Wow.
And for a whole year, you would get on these interviews and you wouldn't talk about it in the first person. And so that's when I realized I had kind of crossed a bridge, right? And I became comfortable, because it was very traumatic, and I kind of had separated myself from it. Like, it was, even while I was writing the book, it's like I was writing about somebody else. I had separated myself.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that.
The crazy thing was that my part of the interview, I didn't interview myself, of course. I had another author interview me. She interviewed me first. And then I started writing the book and interviewing all the other women. Every time I would go to read my interview, I couldn't read it. I would have these panic attacks. I couldn't read the interview. So I said, I'm not going to be able to finish the book. But then I said, I'm just going to write the book. And at the end, now it's a year later, I was able to finally read my interview. And then I inserted it into the book. But I had to just kind of put it aside, because even just reading it would just send me right back into that same place.
I can see that. May I read this comment from?
Yeah, that's why I left it up. I thought that was important.
So you're putting those up there. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
It's up there so everybody can see it, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay. Enough said. Enough said.
And that's a testament to you, your strength and your resilience. Your children are a testament to you. Yes.
Yes.
That makes it all worthwhile for me. They just
Indeed,
will never know. They'll never know.
So I want to thank you again, ladies. And you said a lot. I don't know if you have any last words you want to add, but I really appreciate Shona, your bravery, well, I guess you're obviously Northern Greyhound, so we can't expect any less from the Greyhounds.
Go Greyhounds!
To come out with that bravery. But I had to add that in there. But your bravery has really impressed me, and this is the second time you've been on publicly talking about it. So just keep the faith and try to reach as many people as you can, as Kaleema is with her book. And I just appreciate you all so much. And thank you, Kaleema, for including me in one of those conversations. You wanted to have conversations with me.
Yeah, I want you on Tuesday, on a Sunday, and to come on TikTok and talk excuse me, about your experience. And we've helped so many people. So many women come into my lives, and they're talking about their physical abuse. They're talking about their recovery. Some are still struggling, and it will really help them to hear your story. When he asks you how you're doing, and I'm looking like she's, we can't just look at someone and say they're doing great, but you look great. You don't look like what you've been through. And you would be an inspiration to them. They would see you and say, oh my gosh, I can make it. I can do it too. They would see you and know that they can push forward and they can make it too. Yes.
Just put another comment up there. And this is another testament from your daughter, right?
Yes, my oldest daughter. Yes.
Okay.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you for putting that comment up there.
Wow.
Okay, ladies.
I made it through to the end with no tears.
And Shona, we'll continue to talk, and we'll see you when you come this way. I guess our class will be doing something soon, but even if the class didn't do anything, anytime you come home, let me know you're home so we can
I
get together.
know. It would be so nice if several people can get together. I'm tired of just as few times as I've been home, I see, a couple of people this time, a couple of people that time. If we could have one gathering, I would love to see a lot of people.
Yeah, like it was when we celebrated our 45th. That was fun.
Man, I will never forget
That was
that.
fun.
That
Yeah.
was the only
Okay.
one that I was able to attend. Some people I
Yeah.
remembered. I couldn't believe I remembered. Some people I didn't. Man, 45 years is a long time. That was really
And
good.
and most of those people had no idea what you had been through, but they
No,
do now. I see
could.
Maureen Shepherd is on here. Dana is on here watching, our classmates. So,
She was on
all right.
last time. I appreciate your
Yeah.
support. That was wow. You don't
Yeah,
know
we're
how
going to
warm
be
I feel.
looking for your book. We're going to be looking for your book.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I have
Yes.
heard that before. But I think it's amazing how once you start to reflect, it just flows. It just flows. And a lot of things that I thought I did not remember, it just comes back. Like I said, it just flows. So
Right.
it's a possibility. I can see that.
Yeah.
I've been told that by several people actually. So maybe when I find the time.
Yeah.
That's the thing,
We'll look
right?
forward to it.
I'm still an old bird, I'm working a full-time job. I got
All
to
right.
get
And before we go, Kaleema,
One page a week. Pick one day
yeah.
out of the
That's a
week.
good way to look at it. Thank you for that tip.
Page. You don't have to write a whole book at once. One page.
Yeah, that's what intimidates people, thinking they have to write the whole book. One page,
That makes perfect
here
sense.
and there.
Yes, you don't have to plow through it. I plowed through mine because it was kind of purging for me, and I was in therapy, and I'm plowing through the book.
Okay.
But really and truly, just if you set aside one day out of the week to set aside only an hour or 30 minutes to get, to write your thoughts. They don't even have to be organized at the time.
I've
Just
already
writing your
said
thoughts,
you're
and before
so
you know it,
smart.
you'll be on your way to the publisher, and you'll say,
I've
"Wow, how
already
did I do
said
that?
you are so smart.
Yes.
Yeah. Even with these gadgets now, you can talk it
That's
out. You
true.
can talk it
That's
to,
true. That's
and it
true.
writes down everything you're saying. So
Okay, guys.
sometimes
Okay.
that's easier for people to talk.
Okay,
Yeah.
But
you've
anyway, we're
pleaded
gonna
your
go.
case. You have
We
pleaded your
already
case.
talked like one chapter already tonight.
You're right. Oh, and there are more chapters I could add.
Yes,
Believe me.
you completed one tonight.
Wow.
Kaleema, give your information one more time before we go, so people can.
Okay, my book, Hidden in Plain Sight, is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, and Kindle. I put it in the chat, but it's showing in the private chat. Once we get off, I'll go and put it in the public chat in the comments. And I hope you have an opportunity to read my book. And I hope I earn your review. I'm at 5 stars at Amazon and Barnes & Noble right now. But what I want to do is to write, I'm working on a workbook for 2025, and the reviews will be very helpful for me to make sure that I cover things in the workbook that might need to be expanded upon and help us chart a path to recovery. That's what I want to do with the workbook, because the book does include 9 red flags that you've been groomed by the narc, 8 steps to recovery, but the workbook is going to be a way for us to be accountable to ourselves, right? And to do those things we need to do to recover mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, and legally.
And you might have to send Shona a check because she's really been
I know
advertising for you tonight.
I do. Yes, thank you so much, Shona. Thank you so much.
Okay, ladies, take care. We'll see you next time.
All right.
And don't forget, everybody watching, don't forget to.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was
don't forget to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I need to get you on my Zoom so we can have it even just 30 minutes. Is all that,
I'm there.
And I'm gonna work you up to the whole 2 hours.
Wow, you are good. Okay.
Remember, everybody to like, subscribe, and comment, and share this show tonight with all the people you know. Take care. I'll see you next.
It's time for us to sit down at the table and turn this chaos into something stable. For love, one on one. We will not accept defeat, not on our land, not in our streets. Getting it done, reaching out to save the youth, letting them know the truth.